Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. In one of my recent videos, you may have seen me using a sneaky pre-sale sample of Aqua Cast Turbo from Elichem Resins. And in that video, I discovered that Aqua Cast Turbo cures in less than half the time as the regular Aqua Cast. Well, you will be pleased to know that Elichem Resins now have Aqua Cast Turbo available to the public. So now that I've received some more, I can make another video using it. And I got to thinking about it and I thought, what kind of eco resin application would benefit from the fast cure time? And I thought about when you're layering different colours of the eco resin and it's a long time to wait for each layer to cure. This would be perfect. It will speed it up and I can do a nice layered piece very quickly. So that's my idea for today. Let's see what happens. My plan for trying out the layering effect was to create an ocean scene with 3 waves. And because I'm going to be using lots of small amounts to create my picture, I can't do what I would normally do, which is find out the volume of the mould, go onto the Elichem website, use the Aqua Cast calculator. I would normally do that, but I couldn't do that for this because, I'm just using lots of little bits and I just had to guess. However, it wasn't a complete guess because I knew what the mixing ratio was. I measured out 20 grams of water and then I multiplied that by 2.5 to get 50 grams of powder. Because the mixing ratio is 2.5 parts powder to 1 part water. And the great thing is, just like all the other water-based casting compounds from Elichem Resins, it's versatile. So you can add more or less water depending on the thickness you want your solution to be. Once I'd finished measuring, I gave it a really good mix and I was ready to start applying it to my mould. I decided to draw on with my mixing spatula 3 wiggly lines of white, and that's supposed to be the edge of each wave. And obviously this is not going to look very, very realistic like it would if you were using epoxy resin. It's going to be a much more abstract look, but I couldn't wait to see how it would turn out. Now, because I knew I was going to be guessing the amounts I would need today, I had another mould on hand. It's a jar mould, and what I decided to do was pour in all my leftovers into the jar mould, and then I would have a jar to go with the tray. Okay, back to the tray, and this time I'm going to be doing some of the blue for the waves, and so I needed a bigger pot and more of the Aqua Cast Turbo, using the same ratio as before, 2.5 to 1. I don't know if you've noticed, and please tell me if you have, because I don't know if it's my imagination, but I think the Aqua Cast Turbo is actually a lot whiter than the original Aqua Cast, which seems a little bit creamier in colour. What do you think? Is it just my imagination? I'm not sure. Anyway, let's add some pigment. I've separated my Aqua Cast Turbo into 2 separate jars. I wanted a little bit of it to be darker than the rest of it. So this part is the dark part. I've added a few drops of the Blue Lagoon pigment that I was using. And after giving it a good mix again, it was time to apply it. I just wanted it at the end. So I didn't actually use all of what I'd mixed. And I was able to use the leftover to mix into my other pot of white. Now, those white lines were already firm. And that's what I find quite interesting. The demould guidelines are 15 to 20 minutes. However, when you're not demoulding it straight away and you're not putting it under that pressure of taking it out of the mould, after you've applied it to the mould like I did with those white lines, it's ready in about 5 minutes. It's dry. Isn't that amazing? You don't actually have to wait the 15 to 20 minutes. Once you've poured it, it cures really quickly. If I was going to try and get it out of the mould in one piece, then I would have to wait 15 to 20 minutes. But just for what I'm doing today, layering one next to the other, it was dry enough for the next layer after a few minutes. So that's really a bonus for this technique. So once I'd added my lighter Aqua Cast Turbo, I took a micro brush and just tried to mix it up a little bit so it wasn't so much of a definite line between the light and dark. I just wanted to try and blend it together. And then once again I added my leftovers to my jar mould. As soon as I'd finished pouring in all the excess into my jar mould, I mixed up some more of the same colour, and you'll probably already be able to see the way it's laying on top of the layer that you've just seen me do. It's not mixing with it. That's because that other layer is already firm. And that's in the time it took me to mix up my next batch. So again, it will have been about 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 4. But yeah, not long at all. So yeah, it's quite amazing really, because when it's in your jug, your silicone jug, it's not setting quickly. It's only once you've poured it onto your surface that it starts to set. The actual jar life or pot life or whatever you want to call it, it's not bad at all. It's, it keeps liquid, especially if you keep stirring it for quite a decent amount of time, probably about 8 minutes. So here you can see I've done the third layer already. This time I chose a different shade. This is called Peacock, this colour. I would highly recommend putting your mould on a levelling table. That way you can tap your levelling table to remove any bubbles. You don't want to be tapping the mould or moving the mould when you're doing any kind of layering, because you don't want your layers to dislodge from the mould as you move it, because then they start leaking underneath each other. So just tap the table or move your levelling table to remove the bubbles and get them to come to the top. Right, now for something different. I thought because the next layer is going to be the sand layer, I thought I would try actually adding some sand onto the mould before adding the Aqua Cast Turbo on top. I wasn't sure what would happen, but I really wanted to try it. So here I'm using a teaspoon just to gently apply the sand onto the mould. After I'd finished applying the sand, I mixed up some more Aqua Cast Turbo. This time I coloured it with the autumn bark colour and just poured it in around the edges first, because I didn't want the Aqua Cast Turbo to push the sand down to the edges. I wanted it to just stay where it was. So I started with the edges and added the rest on top. Right, so with this one, you might notice it's a lot thicker. I think I added slightly less water, not on purpose. I just wasn't being careful, I think, because it was a lot thicker. And it just goes to show you how different it is if you just change the ratio a bit. It's really useful, because this was so creamy and thick. I was able to spread it over that sand with my spatula and it worked out really well. My only problem was that I didn't mix up enough, and I had to go off and mix up some more after doing this, after I'd smoothed it out. And by the time I came back with my new batch, about 2 minutes later, that had set firm, and I ended up with a lump in the middle because the 2 layers wouldn't blend together. And yeah, so that's something to be careful of if you're guessing. Try to overcompensate if you can. I mean, I wasn't so worried. I knew that I could just sand it down after demoulding it. But yeah, it doesn't look great at the moment, does it? So once I'd finished with all the pouring, I did give it the 15 minutes, although I don't feel it was necessary because most of it had already cured previously. But anyway, for that last layer, I gave it the full 15 minutes, just to be sure. And then the moment I'd been waiting for, getting it out of the mould and seeing how it would look. Now, there were some good points and some not so good points. When I'd pigmented the very first amount of Aqua Cast Turbo at the beginning, I'd put a lot of pigment in there, and too much really. It's bled into the other layers, but I can sort that out, and I'm going to show you how I sort out the little bits that I'm not so keen on in just a minute. It's very easy, but I was really impressed with that sand texture. I kind of expected there to be a layer of sand just stuck to the surface, but it didn't work like that. The Aquacast sunk through the sand, and I just got a really beautiful mottled effect, and it really does look like sand, but at the same time it's really smooth. So I was really happy about that. So let's have a look at the jar. And considering that was just using all my leftover bits, I really love it. It's really got like a flavour of the ocean to me. There's just something about it that says ocean, and I love that. And the lid, you didn't see me pouring that, but I used some of my leftover autumn bark colour for the lid, and so it all goes together with the tray really well. I'm thinking I might laser engrave that in a future video. Anyway, let's sort this tray out. So what I love to do with the HydroFlow sealer, which is also from Elichem Resins, is I use it mixed with my pigment that I've used already in the piece that I'm touching up. I mix that pigment into it, and I can use it as a paint which matches it perfectly, because obviously it's the same pigment. And you can use it if you've had any issues on your piece, just to paint over the problem areas. And that's what I did, and I've done that all over the tray. I'm not going to show you all of the painting, but all of those little bits where there's a bit of bleeding of the pigment involved, I just went over it and blended it in just a little bit, and it was sorted. And then I went over the bits of missing white with a little bit of white acrylic paint, and you would have never known there was an issue. So here is the complete set all finished, and I'm really happy with the results. But I'm more happy to know that Aqua Cast Turbo is actually even faster than I thought it was, and it works perfectly for this technique. And for a first time at layering Aqua Cast Turbo, I'm really pleased with myself, and I think with some more practice I will be able to get it just right without any of the bleeding, just by, altering the amount of pigment I add. And as this is brand new to the market, it is currently only available in the UK at the time of filming, but I think that will change very quickly. If you would like any of the other Elichem products, Laura's Art Corner does stock a lot of the Aquacast range, and also some of the Elichem Resins too. So be sure to pay her a visit. Links and discount codes for the products will be in the video description. So what are you waiting for? Get yourself into turbo mode, speed over to Elichem Resins and pick yourself up some Aqua Cast Turbo today. If you've enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you would like to, and I will see you again next time. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.